Alright, so if you were here last week, I think most of you were, if not all of you, then we started our new series called Refuel. I used the illustration of the dashboard lights on the car, right? The check engine light, the low fuel light, the warning lights that go off, that even when they come on, a lot of times everything seems okay. Right? I told you about my car that it came on and everything ran great. I didn't notice it at all, so I let it go. But when they come on for a reason. They're extremely important because they give us an indication that something under the hood is not operating correctly. And that if we ignore it long enough, it's going to eventually become a big problem. We talked about how many people are running on empty, and they just kind of ignore those warning signs in their life. How too often people reduce Jesus to a list of do's and don'ts, and this is how I should behave, this is what I say, these are the things I don't say, I just modify my behavior so I act a certain way, and then they call that faith. But that walking with Jesus, living a refueled life, is something totally different and so much more. I told you that rather than doing what we think we should be doing, that your faith should really be more about being the person that God has called us to be. Does everybody have that piece of paper? Anybody not have a piece of paper? Okay, good, because you're going to need that, because in a little while I'm going to have you write some different things in those places. Don't start now, because you're going to have no clue what it is that I actually want you to write in there. The last week we looked at a guy named Nicodemus, probably not an unfamiliar name if you've been in church for any stretch of time in your life. He was a Pharisee, a rule follower. He made a living off following the rules, all the do's and don'ts, the 10 Commandments, and he thought that's what it looked like that really connected with God, right? Following the rules, doing the churchy things, that's connecting with God. So he goes to meet with this Jesus guy one night. He does it at night because he doesn't really want anybody to know that he's going. So he goes to meet with him. Jesus talks to him for a minute, and he kind of throws all of these preconceived notions that Nicodemus had. Everything he built his whole life on, he kind of throws it to the side. And he says, listen, it's simple. Just follow me. Just walk with me, abide in me. If you do that, man, it's going to go good for you. That's really all you have to do. It's not about just the rules. It's about me. Now, all of that sounds good. It's probably not the first time you've heard that in a church, right? Just abide in Christ. It's a Bible verse. Just walk with Jesus and everything's going to work out. That sounds great. But how do we do it? That's the real question. How do we actually do that? And that's what tonight and next week are about. I want to look at some practical ways that we can begin to live a refueled life. Having or maybe just restoring a connection with God. But there's a problem. There's a lot of things in your life competing for your time, for your attention, for your affections. There's too many channels to watch, too many TikTok and YouTube videos to watch, too many games to play, too much homework, too many practices. There's so many things in life, too many hours at work, that are competing for your time and your attention and your affections. And in the hurriedness and the busyness of our lives, we often miss God's voice completely. We're so easily distracted that we can hardly make it through a church service without texting or checking our phone or maybe elbowing the person next to us and giggling. I see it every single week from standing up here. We're so distracted. If I were to simply ask each one of you one by one, how busy are you? The answers would probably be off the charts for most of you. You're busy. Well, let's try this. At your age, according to scientists, for all they know, they say that the average preteen and teenager needs about 10 to 11 hours of sleep every night to be fully cognitively functioning and at their peak, at their prime. How many of you in here would say that every single night, consistently, maybe there's one anomaly here or there, but consistently you get about 10 to 11 hours of sleep every single night? Raise your hand. Maybe two? One for sure, one's maybe. How many of you would say that every single night, consistently, you get at least 8 or 9 hours of sleep? Every single night. A few more. Buffy gets 8 or 9. You got a baby. Don't even talk to me. Don't even talk to me if you got a baby and you get a consistent 8 or no.
Don't be jelly.
No, we ain't friends. I'm taking my cup back. How many of you would say that you get habitually less than 8 hours every night? Right? right? I would definitely raise him. Even before the baby, I'd raise my hand. Yeah, Wes has raised him twice. He gets like 4. Here's the deal. I think what we're actually doing in life is we're not just robbing ourselves of a few nights' sleep. I think the busyness in our life is actually robbing our souls. Because we invest so much of ourselves into things that we don't really want to hear this, but that don't actually matter. And we ignore the things that God really has for us. There are a ton of things competing for our time, but tonight I want to challenge you to follow the story of a guy named Elijah. If you were here on Sunday morning a few weeks ago, we were in 1 Kings, I told you his story. He was a prophet during a time when a large section of Israel had kind of left God and started kind of saying, hey, we're going to do the God thing on this day, but we're going to incorporate all these other gods too from the people around us. And there was one false god, who was kind of the big cheese of all of them. His name was Baal. Right? He was a big deal. He was the god of fertility, the god of the harvest. If he was happy with you, everything in life was amazing. If he was mad, everything was going to fall apart. He was the main god of the Canaanites around him. And so a lot of the Israelites started following him too. And so they were kind of had a foot in both camps. So we got Elijah, he comes out here, he's had enough, and so he challenges the prophets of Baal. And he says, all right, we're going to have like a showdown of gods here. And I'm pretty confident mine's going to win because mine's actually alive and yours is pretend. So let's set up these 2 altars, and we're going to get 2 bulls. We'll let you pick the bull that you want. And we're going to prepare them and get them ready for a sacrifice to our gods, right? That was a common practice, not just to the God of the Bible, but they would sacrifice to all the gods. So he says, all right, you guys go first. I'm going to be a gentleman and let you go first. Go ahead and ask your God, Baal, to just set your offering on fire. Like, that's not hard for the God of Canaan, right? That's not difficult. I mean, he's the one who makes it rain. He makes your crops grow. He makes you be able to have children. Surely he can light a fire on his own altar. So they start praying, nothing happens. They keep praying, still nothing happens. Hours are going by. Finally Elijah says, well, maybe he's in the bathroom, maybe he's asleep. Yell louder. So they start screaming and cutting themselves and doing all kind of weird stuff. Nothing happens. So finally, after hours, Elijah's had enough, and he says, all right, it's my turn. But we're going to up the ante a little bit. So he has to go get these 4 large jugs of water. I don't know how much you know about fire, but fire and water don't really go good together. Wet things typically don't burn. And he has them dump these 4 large jugs of water on the altar before he even gets started. It's not wet enough. Do it again. So they get 4 more. A third time. So 12 huge buckets of water they dump on this altar. It's drenched. It says there was a trench around it of water. And then he says this short prayer. And God sends fire down, not just to consume the offering, not just to consume the wood. It annihilates the stones holding the altar up, all of the dirt around it, and dries up every ounce of water in the trenches around it. And so all of that has just happened right before we pick up our story tonight. It's in 1 Kings chapter 19. This is Elijah right after all of this has happened. He's collapsed now to busyness, exhaustion, frustration. It says, but the Lord said to him, what are you doing, Elijah? Elijah replied, I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. See, Elijah had been busy, but he wasn't just busy doing nonsense, right? He wasn't just out playing video games or wasting his time. He was busy doing God's work. He was God's man doing God's thing. But his exhaustion had left him empty, to the point where he actually asked God, just take me. He needed to be refueled. He felt alone. He felt like everything in the world was against him. And God just needed him to stop. So he says, go out and stand before me on the mountain, the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. See, Elijah was trying to hear God above all of the noise, but everything around him was competing for his attention. He was waiting for God to speak, and he thought, well, this huge windstorm, this big act, this is going to be God, but God wasn't in it. And then there's an earthquake. Well, surely God told me to wait here. This earthquake, that's going to be God. And nothing. the explosion, the fire, everything else, but God's voice wasn't in any of it. It wasn't until Elijah was quiet that he was able to hear it. It says, after the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. See, my desire is that you guys don't turn into a group of adults that's life is just hurried. That look great on the outside, that show up to church every Sunday and you look like the greatest Baptist in the world, but on the inside, like Elijah, you're empty and tired and exhausted and confused and broken people. Because I believe that God wants us to live differently. Last week we used the dashboard lights to represent some warning signs in our life. Specifically the low fuel light. Right? When we're starting to run on empty, that sign that says, hey, you better do something or you're going to run out. Tonight I want to talk about how we can actually get more in our tank. It's great to know you're low on gas. If you don't know where a gas station is, it really doesn't do you any good. So this week I'm going to use a different common item in the car world, stoplight. Does anybody not know what a stoplight is? Okay. You drive, so I really hope you know what's, although around here.
I was saying that for the people in the room that don't know.
Oh, you were just trying to, well, Jackson and Charlie don't, that makes sense. All right, so tonight we're going to look at a red light. We're going to talk about the red and the yellow lights this week, and then we're going to talk about the green light next week. Last week I told you about my old truck, the coolest truck that you've ever heard about. Even if you don't know that it's the coolest truck you've ever heard about, it is.
Red means go.
What?
Red means go, right?
Okay. So, one night, I'm in that truck. I'm on my way home from a friend's house. It's really late. I'm really tired. I'm about to get in trouble because I'm not going to be home in time. And that wasn't a good thing in our house. That meant I wouldn't be driving my really cool truck for a while. So, I was in a hurry, and I was at a red light. It was one of those lights that, never turns green. I kid you, this is no exaggeration. It was red for 10 whole minutes. Nothing changed. I pulled forward a little bit, because sometimes you don't trip the sensor. So I pulled up a little bit, pulled back, nothing was happening. So for had to be 10 minutes, I sat there. So finally I'm like, all right, it's never going to turn green, and I don't want to lose my truck for the next week. So I looked around, nobody's out here, it's safe. So I go. As soon as I did, I got plowed by a semi. I'm just kidding. That would make this story really cool, though, wouldn't it? No, that didn't happen. I made it through the intersection just fine. Nothing happened, right? So I get all the way through the intersection. The problem is somebody saw me. And that somebody had blue lights on his car. And that somebody pulled me over and did not care that I was in a hurry to get home. And he gave me a ticket. Here's the deal. The busyness and the hurry in my life didn't matter to him because I broke the law. There was a rule in place, there was a law in place, and how busy I was or how hurried I was didn't affect that law at all. And here's the deal, the busyness and hurry in your life, it doesn't matter with the laws of God either. And when we break those laws, there's a consequence. Elijah learned this lesson and heard God's voice, but it took him getting away from everything else, focusing, listening to God without any distraction. So the first thing that we have to do, the red light, is we have to stop sometimes. If we want to live a refueled life, you've got to take a break. How often do we actually just stop? Not enough. Just like there are certain places that you're required by law to stop the car, a red light, a stop sign. They put those there because there's places where it's dangerous for you just to go at your own whim, right? And they know that for you and everybody else on the road just to go as you wanted to go, people are going to die. God's laws also require us to stop sometimes. So I want you to think about that. When was truly the last time that you stopped? Really stopped. No YouTube, no Facebook or Instagram, no talking, no texting, nothing. Just stop. Just you and the quietness. I'm going to try it right now. Nobody move. Nobody talk. We can barely do it for 10 seconds. And it feels weird. Especially when you're standing in front of everybody who's staring at you. I appreciate y'all closing your eyes. It feels weird because we're so used to noise. We're so used to the distractions of our phone and our music and just the sounds around us of life moving at such a hectic pace that, to be honest with you, it's not just awkward, I think it's a little bit scary. I think we're afraid of stopping sometimes. Elijah was doing great things for God. He just embarrassed Baal, the god of Canaan, that his people, God's people, were turning to in this huge showdown. He was doing amazing things for God. God had to get him to stop because he was running on fumes and he was empty. Too many of you are already falling into the trap of expectations of your parents to get into the right schools or make sure that your grades are a certain way or that you're working enough if you're an older student or that you achieve something in sports or that you're involved in all of these different things, that you're volunteering enough, you're showing up early for extra things at church, whatever it is, that we're not learning what it feels like to stop. I'm going to share with you a few verses that King David wrote literally thousands of years ago. Because we tend to think this is a new problem, right? We got these things now. This is the devil. Now that we have smartphones, we never had this problem. We didn't have smartphones. We still had the same problem. My great-grandparents who didn't have television, they still had the same problem. It isn't new. David writes in Psalm 46, God is our refuge and shield, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we'll not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surged. Who in here's ever played Halo? Anybody ever played Halo? That's kind of older again. Jackson, that's my guy right there. Titus thinks he may have, he's not sure. So Halo 3 was my game. I know I'm old. But in Halo 3, when you get shot a few times, something happens. Your shield goes away. And you've got to duck and cover behind something in order to recharge your shield or you're just going to die. Halo's a video game. It's so much more important than in real life that sometimes we know when it's time to take cover. We hide in the refuge of God and just stop and take cover and catch our breath. God promises in this passage that we can stop and we can hide in Him. And when we do that, we'll be refueled. And that piece of paper that everybody said they had, will you give Robert one? Weston will bring you one. So, on the very top, it says, this week I will put down blank. And I want you to think about this for me. Don't write anything just yet. I want you to think about, where do you need to stop? Where do you need to duck and take cover so that you can be recharged? Maybe it's your keyboard or your controller or your phone, whatever it is for you. Maybe it's none of those things for you. But I want you to think about that and write that in that blank on that paper, because that's your first step in refueling with God. And before you write it, I want to tell you this seems unusual. And you may actually need somebody to give you permission to do this, so I'm going to do it. Because with teachers and even leaders at church and parents, your coaches, your bosses, with all of these expectations, all of it can sort of pile up on top of you and you don't really feel like you can stop. You can. So I want you to think about, what is that one thing this week that you just need to put down? Not for good, but just for this week. To stop. God says, take refuge in me. Slow down. Create a pause in your day this week to start to recharge, to refuel your soul. It may be something really, really small. Maybe something huge. There's a quote from a guy named Doug Fields. If you ever read anything on youth ministry, this guy wrote like everything that was ever invented on youth ministry. Out of one of his books, he says, just like you don't refuel your car while it's moving, you can't refill your soul while you're in a flurry of activity. I can't fill my car with gas when I'm going 60 miles an hour down the highway. I mean, I guess I could try, but that would not go well. Right? When you want to refill your car, you have to stop to refill it. Your soul is the same way. If you're constantly moving, constantly busy, you never have time to refill your soul. We've got to stop. Yes, Jackson. Is it have anything to do with all of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
if you're in a plane, you can't actually refuel.
Yes, they have some cool technology for planes. I'm glad he wrote car. All right, so that was the first one, red light, stop. The second one, with the yellow light, be quiet. To live a refueled life, we have to tune into God and tune out the noise. Not only do we have to slow down, when we finally do slow down in life, we make the mistake of always filling it with noise. I am the world's worst at this. I like to sleep with the TV on or some kind of noise. I don't rarely ever have quiet in my life except for my Bible time. Outside of that, I always have noise. And typically, we always fill it with noise. Who knows what a decibel meter is? Have you ever heard of that? You know what it is? They have them like in all the college stadiums. It just lets you know how loud something is, right? So if it makes a bunch of noise, the meter goes up. Like the little applause meters. You've seen those? That's all those are. It's just a decibel meter. Usually we're surrounded by noise, by vibrating phones, by YouTube, TikTok, noise everywhere we go. And so on this piece of paper, the second set of things, Charlie, has anything to do with what we're talking about?
Yeah, he kind of is. Taylor Swift's concert.
I don't care. All right, so on that piece of paper, fill in the blanks as I read these to you, and then I want you to add them up. No one's going to see them. It's just for you, so be honest. I want you to give yourself either 1, 2, or 3 in each category. 1 is I have a little bit of noise in this area. 2 is I've got quite a bit of noise in this area. And 3 is it's overwhelming the amount of noise in my life in this area. So I'm going to give you 5 categories. The first one is how much TV and video game noise do you have in your life? Is it just a little bit? Is it, you don't have to tell me. Do you have a question about it?
Yeah. Is talking heads like talking on the phone?
I'll get to it. We're going to go through each one. I'll explain each one as we go through. So how much TV and video game noise do you have in your life? 1, 2, or 3. A little bit, an average amount, or is it overwhelming? Do you spend so much of your time with television or watching videos of any kind or video games? The second one, how much noise is coming out of my mouth or my thumbs? Talking or texting? How busy am I with constantly staying on my phone and communicating and talking with other people? A little bit, is that a small part of my day? I guess you could put 0, like if you just never talk at all, you could put 0. But a little bit, an average amount, or does that consume most of your time? Third one, music, movies, or just scrolling through social media on your phone. A little bit, an average amount, or a whole lot. Number 4, school, sports, clubs, anything extracurricular. How much noise in your life comes from the extracurricular things and school? And finally, work if you're older and you go and you have a job and you work. And the things that you do here at the church. Like some of you guys do praise team and different things. You volunteer to help with the kids upstairs and a lot of different things at our church. So 1, 2, or 3 for each one of those categories. And I want you to add those up. Hopefully we can all do very simple basic math. Everybody got a number? Everybody not? Look at me if you don't have a number. Alright, so everybody's got a number. I think. No, Riley does not. Okay. I can tell you're like back and forth. I'm like, I don't know what to do. You're a senior. I was pretty sure the math wouldn't be that hard, so I was like, what do I do? I don't know. I wasn't. Anyway, so we've all got a number. I'm not a good teacher. Ask him a kid. All right, so I'm going to tell you what that number means. Raise your hand if your number was somewhere between 1 and 8. If your number is between 1 and 8, that means you've got some margin. You have some quiet in your life. Raise your hand if your number is 9 through 12. Okay, that's the majority of the room. 9 through 12 means that you have warning lights going off in your life, and it's something that you need to work on, and work on quickly. The noise is beginning to get to be too much in your life. Anybody over 13 or over? Jackson. I'm going to show you what I mean by this with this video. Go ahead and play that video with us.
God. 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 God.
Family.
God.
Family.
God.
Family.
God,
family,
friends,
God,
family,
friends,
God,
family,
friends,
God,
family,
friends,
God,
money,
family,
friends,
God,
money,
family,
friends,
God,
money,
family,
sports,
God,
money, school,
Sports.
friends,
God,
money,
Food.
Young,
friends,
Food.
money,
Food.
Young, God, 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 God.
So while that video may seem a bit extreme and a little annoying, I think some of us here, for being honest, when we watch that, we look at that and we think, it's actually pretty accurate. If we compare that to our lives, it's pretty dead on, to be honest. See, God wants to make a connection with you. And He's there. But usually we're just so clouded out by all of the other things that we can't hear Him. If you look at some of the things on that video, a lot of those were good things, right? Like family. Family's a good thing. Food is amazing. Right? Money's not a bad thing. People get that confused. Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money. Money's not bad. It's not bad to work and earn your money. Right? Having friends is good. Having a boyfriend or a girlfriend isn't a bad thing. Like, a lot of those things were not bad things. They're important things. But they're not as important as our connection with God. He spoke to Elijah in a whisper. How was he speaking to you? The passage I read you earlier, Psalm 46, here's the rest of it. It says, "Be still and know that I am God. I'll be honored by every nation. I'll be honored throughout the world. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Be still. Stop. Be quiet." And I like the expression, tune into God. I wrote that for a reason, and it may be a little bit lost on you guys. Because y'all just hit like the arrow button on your radio, right? And it just goes to the next number that it'll pick up. Wes is laughing because he knows. Y'all don't know what it actually means to tune in to a radio station. Remember my truck? It didn't have a fancy radio like they have in cars today. It had a tape player, which was pretty high tech. And I even hooked that thing up to my Discman. I had a little thing that went to the headphone jack in my Discman, my portable CD player, and it had a little tape thing on the end, and it would play those. But when I wanted to go to a radio station, I didn't just hit a button and it would scan for the next one. I had some knobs on that bad boy. And I would hit those knobs, and it was an art with those knobs. Everything was going to have a little static with it, but how much depended on within like a nanometer, you'd get that thing and you'd have it just right. But if you turn just that much too far, you go from sports talk to Celine Dion like that. It would only take a second. And you really had to work and focus in, and nobody could tune your car radio but you. Nobody knew how to get it just right but you. It was art. To be honest with you, it was a lot of work. Our spiritual life is kind of like that knob. It's not easy to get in tune with God. It's not easy to stop. It's not easy to be quiet in our life. Over the roar and the rush of everything going on around us, to really hear what He's saying, to stop and listen for that whisper. Even Jesus did this all the time. We read it over and over in the Gospels. He's around a huge group of people, and He's like, no, I've got to get away from all of the noise and go somewhere by myself and just refill, spend some time with the Father. If we want to live a refueled life, we have to create opportunities for God to be heard. It's not opportunities for Him to speak. He's speaking. He is speaking in your life right now. whether you hear it or not, He is speaking. The real question is He being heard? Are you creating the opportunity in your life where He can be heard? Got one more section on that handout I gave you. What do I need to silence in my life? I don't know what that looks like for you. Maybe it looks like turning your phone off for an hour a day. Don't be while you're at school and you have to turn it off anyway. I mean like an hour of your actual time when you could be on your phone a day. Maybe it means not logging into social media or TikTok or YouTube for an entire week. If you drive, maybe it looks like turning off the radio on the way to school every morning this week. Or maybe it means I'm just not going to watch TV this week, or some of y'all might go through withdrawals. Maybe only 30 minutes of TV a week, and I'm going to spend some time without the noise. Maybe none of those. I don't know what that looks like for you, but what in your life do you need to silence in order to stop and be quiet this week? And here's the thing, don't pick something easy. It's not going to be easy. If it's easy, you're not doing it right. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be effective. I imagine a place where students from all over this area can live refueled in the chaos and the craziness of life, but they take the time to stop and be quiet because God is the first priority, even over all of the other good things in their life. Listen, good things can be a sin. God wants me to love my wife. God wants me to be the best dad that I can be to my daughters. He wants that. I am honoring God by honoring my wife and my kids. However, if they get ahead of God in my life, that's a sin. Even good things can be sinful. When they take up so much of our life that we can't give God even a small amount just to stop. Short pauses in the pace of life to focus on what God is saying to you. Like I said, He's speaking. It's just a matter of whether or not He's heard. A student that does that in their life starting now is a student who is going to change the world. It's the kind of person I want to become. But it's a process. And it starts now. This week I challenge you to make good on the commitments that you wrote down on that paper. If you haven't written anything yet, before you go to bed tonight, I want you to really think about it and write something in those spaces. Stop and be quiet and silence that one thing in your life that you need to, so that you can begin to really tune in to who God is and what He's saying in your life. Let me pray for you.